Hello, welcome. I didn't really have to call the room to order. Everyone just quieted down, so it's time. We're right on time. My name is Charles Reeves. I am the Capstone Program Manager here at the School of Sustainability. I just want to make a few thank yous and then get us going right on time here today. First of all, thanks to all of you for being here. This is an important way to celebrate our students and the hard work that they've put in. Second, our community partners, of course, who are on the screen here. For bringing their challenges and opening their organizations and overall just being great to work with. I think that makes this work a lot more fun and engaging, I know for me, and I'm sure for the students. Thank you to the students for your hard work. I think we're here for you today. This is what it's all about. I also want to point out this is a team effort, more than you know. To Ron, Jacob, Lindsay, Kiki, and all the staff, I can't even mention the whole team that makes this happen. I want to thank Josh Abbott, the school director of sustainability, for his support, encouragement, and vision for making this not just a presentation, but a community event where we bring together alumni and others to support our students and bring this sustainability community together. Finally, last but not least, our fearless leader of this cohort, Candace Carr-Kelman, who is a big reason. The students and the clients put in the hard work, and Candace was the one who pushed them to the finish line and made these projects as good as you're going to see today. And I can tell you, as the program manager who goes out and speaks with our clients, it gives me a lot of confidence and pleasure to hand these projects over to Candace in the class. So thank you, Candace, and I'm going to pass it over to Candace.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate that. I don't need to, I've got this one, but we'll leave that for Q&A. So welcome. Thank you for being here to celebrate this great cohort, the class of 2026 MSUS. And so we are here to celebrate their capstone projects, their degrees culminating experience that they've been working so hard on this past semester, and it's really been a pleasure working with all of them. We do a team-based capstone because teamwork and collaboration is really important in sustainability and to do really work in general out there in the world. And it's one of our key sustainability competencies that the Master of Sustainability Solutions students must demonstrate in their degree program, along with the ability to think in terms of sustainable systems, interacting, possible futures, sustainability strategies, and ethical considerations. So I too would like to thank all of our partner organizations who have been fantastic to work with all semester. I don't even need to work with them because the student teams do such a great job. They are the consultants. They work directly with our project partners the entire time to deliver projects of value to those client organizations. If you are with a client organization and you are here in the room, I hope you get a chance to talk with the student teams afterwards. I believe that the deliverables they've produced are valuable, and they will be posted in the library Keep site, so anybody can access them, and that will be the version that is approved by our partner organizations. So I would also like to thank Charles for doing such a fantastic job curating these projects and helping us to stay in touch with our project partners year after year, and helping us put together this event and the happy hour afterwards, along with GFL event staff Jacob Tergucci in the back there. And I would also like to give a big shout out and thanks to Lindsay Plate-Jones, Assistant Director of Graduate Academic Services of the School of Sustainability, who is helping us run the Zoom today. And so if you are on Zoom and you have a question, just put in the chat to allow Lindsay to unmute you during Q&A. We'll have Q&A following each of the presentations. Each of our 5 teams today has 15 minutes to present, followed by a few minutes for Q&A. So we'll really just have time for a couple of questions for each team. So Lindsay will be monitoring the chat in Zoom, and Jacob and I will be circulating with mics because we have to ask questions on mics so that the folks on Zoom can hear. So don't ask your question until you get the mic when that time comes. So I hope that we're able to keep those questions short because we're going to stick to our timeline so we can make it over to Eureka and celebrate afterwards. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor over to our first group, the Green Zone Game Changers, working with Legends Global at State Farm Stadium.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dior Myers, and we are the Green Zone Game Changers. For our Capstone project, we've been working with Legends Global and State Farm Stadium to help them increase their public-facing sustainability messaging. But before we get started, let me introduce you to our team. This is Juliet, Layla, Gabby, and Nathan, and we're excited to show you some of the strategies we've developed and our recommendations. So the problem that State Farm Stadium is facing actually doesn't have much to do with their capacity for sustainability. If anything, they have a ton of existing sustainability initiatives in the pipeline with some big plans for the future. But what we found is that there's a huge gap between what they're currently doing and how this is being communicated out to the general public. So to help with this, we have been tasked with helping them translate their internal sustainability operations into fan-facing experiences to inform and engage attendees, but also in the future help them position themselves as a recognized leader in sustainable stadium operations. We've been doing this by making 3 separate deliverables: a fan engagement plan, a green game guide, and some proposed sustainability activation ideas.
And for some additional context on the stakeholder landscape surrounding the stadium itself is owned by the Arizona Sports and Tourism Authority, or ASTA. And ASTA contracts out Legends Global, our client and event management company, to operate out of the stadium. Now within the stadium, the Cardinals are their primary tenant, and the Cardinals own these 3 stakeholders: Craft Culinary, Insignia Event Services, and Fanatics. Legends Global partners with these 3 companies, Copia, ABM, and Safe Management, and together they cover a wide range of responsibilities, including security, fan merchandising, culinary, waste diversion, etc. And given the scope of our project, these are the spaces that we're operating within: sustainability messaging, educating attendees through visible, compelling communication; waste diversion, given that this is the lowest barrier, highest impact intervention point at this stage; marketing, advertising the stadium's sustainability initiative, accomplishments, and goals, and tying all this together through hands-on fan engagement.
So moving on to our methods, we divided this section into 2 parts: data collection and data analysis. So for our first method of data collection, we started off with our site observation by way of a stadium tour, where we went on site, pretty much walked along the concourse, taking photos of the waste bins, any sustainability signage or messaging we saw, as well as concessions packaging, etc. And one of the first things we noticed was that there are only recycling and landfill bins out on the concourse for the public to use, with compost and food waste being measured back of house only. So that's something we took note of. After this, we were invited back on site. As a part of stakeholder engagement, we went to the Sustainable Stadium Alliance meeting, which is pretty much a working group or a coalition of stadium partners or stakeholders we mentioned earlier, all working on sustainability at State Farm Stadium. At this meeting, we shared our ideas for the project. We also learned about each stakeholder's individual roles in stadium sustainability, and they even gave us some of their ideas and recommendations for things they would want to see in our final deliverables. After this meeting, we had a much better understanding of our scope and how everything in the stadium is intertwined. Last but not least, we recently collected a ton of data by way of our fan survey at the Bruno Mars Romantic Tour. The whole purpose of this survey was to gain a better understanding of overall attitudes towards sustainability of the public, waste disposal behaviors and motivations, and then general knowledge and awareness of sustainability. After this surveying and looking at all of the findings, we used this to make very informed recommendations for our final deliverables based directly off of fan feedback. And then looking to how we analyze some of our findings, we started off with a SWOT analysis, looking at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that State Farm Stadium is facing. And we found that while State Farm Stadium has a pretty strong internal systems to build on, the greatest impact will really be in improving their waste infrastructure and signage and expanding outreach and engagement, all while taking note of the budget constraints at the moment. We also did a landscape analysis where we looked at 8 comparable NFL stadiums in terms of scale and sustainability initiatives to try to find some successes that we might be able to transfer to State Farm Stadium. One that we really liked was Lumen Fields Go the Extra Yard Challenge. This is a campaign where fans compete against people all over the world and can score green points by doing eco-friendly actions, from ride sharing or eating plant-based meals or even reducing energy use at home. We were also intrigued by Levi Stadium's addition of a sustainability team for this past Super Bowl. And after looking at these initiatives, we were pretty confident that State Farm Stadium could translate these into something different, something new, build on them, and show their commitment to sustainability in this way.
So the survey that we conducted at the Bruno Mars concert actually had a really strong response rate. In roughly 3 hours of surveying, we collected 206 responses with ages ranging from under 18 to over 65. Of the 11 questions that we asked, 2 questions stood out the most to us. Firstly, when asked what would motivate an individual the most to sort their waste correctly at a game, 52% of respondents said that helping the environment would motivate them the most. Additionally, when asked what influences an individual the most for where they sort their waste, 48% said that at bins where there is clear, detailed waste bin labels and signage. This actually helped us in creating recommendations in our deliverables. Additionally, the quotes that you see above are from an optional question that we had at the end of the survey, where respondents were able to leave recommendations and feedback for State Farm Stadium.
Now we'll be going into our fan engagement plan. Our fan engagement plan sets a clear framework on how to involve and inform attendees in sustainability efforts both digitally and within the stadium. Our key strategies that we are going to use is social media, video boards, a digital sustainability webpage, and more visible signage to share achievements and inspire sustainability actions.
So like Abby was saying, a pretty big part of fan engagement is signage. And admittedly, the current stadium signage situation, both on-site and online regarding social media, is pretty spare and inconsistent. So to fill this gap, we have proposed that the stadium post sustainability-related content on relevant holidays, such as Earth Day or National Recycling Day, or whenever the stadium may hit an exciting sustainability goal or accomplishment that would be interesting for the public to know. And this graphic that we have at the bottom here is an example of what that type of post might look like on Green Sports Day, for example. And the 2 graphics that we have above are examples of what some in-site signage might look like, advertising that all of their paper products are fully compostable, or that their waste bins are made from 100% recycled plastic, something that the average attendee may not know otherwise. In addition to this, we have proposed that the stadium have a designated sustainability webpage to continue to advertise these initiatives, provide supplemental information, provide data such as the survey that Nathan was discussing, and additional relevant resources. And to support this, we have also proposed that the stadium implement QR codes on their physical signage that will lead to a virtual waste sorting guide.
The waste sorting guide offers fans and employees an easy-to-use visual guide on how to properly sort their waste. The guide has a list of all of the common waste items found throughout the stadium and how to properly dispose of them. It also includes guidance on how to sort commonly missorted items so as to avoid contamination. So for example, if you have something that needs to be composted and is put in the recycling bin, that could contaminate the entire waste stream. There's also rules for sorting tricky items, such as a greasy pizza box. So whether you have to recycle that or compost it, those instructions are in the guide. And staff do have a slightly more detailed version that aligns with back of the house waste protocols, as well as waste hauler protocols. And they do have a quick reference guide that they can refer to during busy periods, since they are sorting waste during the event and after.
Another way to engage fans is to introduce a gamification aspect that pretty much turns sustainability into an interactive game that fans want to participate in. We are proposing that State Farm does this by integrating sustainability in with the stadium's mobile app. So some ideas we have for the mobile app are to introduce mini games like the ones listed here. One could be a scan to win recycling challenge, where fans scan a QR code, taking them to a quick game, showing proper waste streams for the items in their section attached to a small reward. This could also look like Green Zone Trivia, which would be quick quizzes focused on the stadium's specific sustainability initiatives, pretty much rewarding them for learning about the venue. An example of what that Green Zone Trivia minigame could look like would be here on the side. At the top, that is a true fun fact about State Farm Stadium with some additional information in the middle, and a leaderboard at the bottom for fans to go head to head. Outside of the mini games, we're also proposing that they have an activity or event like a section versus section diversion challenge, which is where seating sections will compete against each other to reach the highest waste diversion rate, and the winning section will receive a digital concessions voucher in collaboration with a stadium partner or a sponsor like Coca-Cola. We're also hoping to see impact messages on the mobile app, like the one here at the bottom. You helped divert X% of waste from the landfill today, as positive reinforcement for any participants.
So we found it imperative to highlight State Farm Stadium employees that are continuing this transition into a more sustainable stadium through celebrating milestones. Recognizing of these milestones will continue to be in back of house through a monthly employee poll selecting a standout employee to receive special prizes, and also through a vendor challenge spotlighting stadium vendors that are making the most sustainable impact. A digital shout-out board is also essential to hear about valued employees and to continue the growth of State Farm Stadium community.
Another one of our deliverables included creating an extensive green game guide with its purpose to be first implemented at a football game at State Farm Stadium. And it's also meant to be replicable for future events down the line. With this, like maybe some future concerts and other off-season events. Within the Green Game Guide, we created a staff checklist that works hand in hand with an example timeline. The staff checklist is meant to be organized and easy to follow throughout the game with information on pre-game, during game, and post-game duties. The checklist is also not meant to be actively checked off, but it's meant to serve as a fallback for employees to look at to ensure they're doing what they're supposed to. The example timeline, like the staff checklist, focuses on different aspects of the game. With the pregame dealing with the hours before an event starts, this could look like 24 hours before the event starts, all the way up to the last couple hours before fans and attendees are allowed to arrive. Within this, it's really important that there is a staff briefing in order to ensure all parties are on the same page. And then for the during game aspect of the timeline, it focuses on high traffic time periods along with real-time adaptation. This real-time adaptation is meant for doing changes as needed throughout a game. Additionally, the post-game aspect of the example timeline deals with what's going to be happening immediately after the game ends. This could include sending out a post-game email and also having a quick 5-minute debrief where staff can talk about what went well and what might need fixing for future events.
To track progress during Green Games, the Green Game Guide provides different tools for monitoring sustainability metrics. So for example, this could look like calculating the percentage of recyclable material that was correctly placed in the recycling bin as opposed to the landfill bin. It could be the number of green zone interactions or interactions with a green team member, or it can be just the total amount of waste generated per attendee. So where does this information go? Well, it goes on the sustainability webpage for the stadium. So if someone's interested in seeing sustainability data or just in general what State Farm Stadium is doing to be more sustainable, they can find it on there. It also will be sent out in a post-game email, which serves to recap the sustainability impact that was seen at the event. And it will also go on a live dashboard through a technology called Spirit, which is a platform that helps organizations track, measure, and reduce their waste using intuitive dashboards such as the one that you see on the screen.
So lastly, we'll be going into our sustainability activations. We have 10 activation ideas, but we'll be covering 3 that are creative, event-specific physical activities or initiatives designed to engage fans, attendees, and employees in State Farm Stadium sustainability efforts.
So one of these ideas is a designated green team. And this team would likely start off as a group of volunteers, but hopefully as the program gains more traction and funding, it would evolve to be a permanent position. But these team members would essentially be deployed around the stadium to help assist with waste diversion efforts or answer any sustainability-related questions that attendees might have and support overall stadium environmental stewardship. And as we're going to go on to describe, these team members will be pretty instrumental in supporting the further activations.
The Green Zone is a dedicated space within the stadium that serves as a centralized location for all sustainability initiatives. Here, fans can come to the Green Zone to learn more about what State Farm Stadium is doing to be more sustainable. They can also engage in different activities, such as playing a prize wheel game or watching a waste sorting demonstration. And as I previously mentioned, there will be a live dashboard in this green zone showing real-time waste diversion data so that when fans come to the green zone, they can directly see the impact that they are having by partaking in these sustainability initiatives. And as Layla mentioned, the green zone is staffed by the green team, which helps to directly educate fans, promote awareness, and answer any questions or concerns they may have.
The two sponsored activities that we'd like to implement at the stadium are Go the Extra Yard Challenge, like Dior mentioned, but we'd also like to implement Caught Green-Handed, which is actually implemented on our ASU campus in a Mountain America Stadium. And it's also sponsored through Coca-Cola, rewarding eco-friendly behaviors on site in the stadium, such as recycling. We'd like to say thank you to Legends Global, State Farm Stadium, and the School of Sustainability. Thank you. Any questions?
Second, Janet, there's one back here.
Hello, my name's Sean Martinez. I'm a first-year MSUS student right now. My question is about the surveys. How did you approach people to participate in the survey? Like, what was your sales pitch? And then kind of a follow-on to that is, did you account for non-participation bias in those surveys?
Yeah, so actually with the survey, the way that we went about it is we had a digital version and a paper version. So the kind of our pitch going up is we'd be like, hey, we're ASU students, we're working with Legends Global in the stadium. We're kind of just trying to get a public perception of sustainability. That's kind of like the brief pitch. We offered if they would want to take it on paper or digitally. But one of the things that we did notice, we didn't have a real way of differentiating between the physical responses. So the digital responses, we could go in and look at all the data individual for each respondent's answers. But because we didn't do it for the physical aspect, we were only able to take the actual responses and throw them into each question just to have a total of those questions. Yeah.
Great job. That was so fun. I really enjoy this day. It's a very special day. And just to see you all in confident and well prepared, excellent work, really something to be proud of. I'm interviewing you for a job. My question is, what did you study and what did you do in your capstone project?
Oh, gosh.
Come on.
Okay. Why not? For me personally? All right. Yeah, well, I am a Master's of Sustainability Solutions student at ASU, and my capstone project was working with State Farm Stadium and Legends Global on sustainable event planning and gauging the feasibility of future sustainability ideas within the stadium.
Hey, my name is Jasmine. I'm also a MSUS student in the first year. I was really interested by the signage that you guys created for sorting at the bins. And I know that sometimes when we see this signage, when it has a lot of words, it can be cluttered. People may not think about using it or reading it. And then especially like at the end of games, they're running out the door and just toss it in the bins, right? So did you guys complete any kind of prototyping or simulation to see the effectiveness of these signage that you guys created for the bins?
That's a really good, that's loud. That's a really good idea and something that would have been great to consider. I'm not sure if we did anything to that level, but.
Most of the events we weren't able to like go to as well, but we also did consider that in our survey. So asking people also that question of if signage affects the way they look at a bin, most of the answers were that they would pick the closest bin, but our green team would also be helping with that issue of just automatically throwing things away. And that's why we're kind of incentivizing that initiative of, oh, like if you throw it away in the right bin, like you'll get a prize to like start that kind of mindset, if that makes sense.
Actually, for the responses for bin signage, it was the most influential thing for individuals for where they actually throw away their waste. So that actually played into the recommendations that we're giving to Legends Global, because a lot of the waste bins on the concourse and stuff, there isn't really much signage for how to sort. They have like a little QR code saying the bins are fully made out of recycled material. So we kind of just use those responses to then give recommendations.
One last question.
Hi, I'm Valerie. I'm also a first-year MSUS student. I just wanted to ask, I'm a little ignorant on sports to a degree, so I just want to clarify a little bit. So this stadium only hosts the Cardinals, or so it's okay. Do they have like halftime shows, and did that factor into any of your proposals, like integrating it into performances or anything like that?
So for like the different time periods of like a football game, it was kind of more focused on in the example timeline, where we wanted to focus on high traffic periods to basically be making sure that anything that's happening within the green game aligns with what's happening with the time periods. So essentially, it's just kind of like, we're not entirely sure about like if there would be like major halftime shows for this event. We were more so focused on making sure that like green team members are around during those high traffic periods to be answering questions for guidance, and also looking into how people are sorting their waste.
Right, great work. Thank you very much. And next, working with the Netherlands Business Support Office, we have the Dutch Bros.
Woo. Hi, hello everyone. My name is Maddie and I'm here with Hayden, Reed, and Margot, and we're gonna be telling you guys a little bit more about our climate tech landscape report that we've been doing with the Netherlands Business Support Office. So we're gonna tell you a little bit more about who the MBSO is, what we've been doing, how we've gone about doing it, and what's come out of it. So to start off, what is the MBSO? The Netherlands Business Support Office is a Dutch governmental trade organization that basically helps to connect Dutch businesses into foreign markets. So they make sure that they're supported and have the partnerships in place in those foreign markets to do business. There's 23 in the whole world, and one of them is in Arizona. It was here mainly for the semiconductor industry, but now they're ready to branch out into some new space.
So the Netherlands Business Support Office approached our team wanting to branch out into the climate tech industry and broadly connect Netherlands' strengths in technology to Arizona's climate issues. Climate tech generally refers to technology and solutions that enable the mitigation of and adaptation to climate change. So in order to help the MBSO with their mission, our team has created a set of educational materials that will help the office attract Dutch climate tech businesses to Arizona.
So briefly diving into some of the methods that we used throughout our project to accomplish this, the primary bulk of our work was landscape analysis. So we consulted a variety of different resources about climate tech in Arizona just to simply learn about it. So we tried to look at different sectors to try to find where there's need, where there's areas of growth, and where there might be some potential synergies with Dutch businesses. We also conducted a number of informational interviews with various organizations that work closely with climate tech in Arizona to try to just gain alternative perspectives about it and also understand where there could be some good chances for Dutch businesses to enter the market. We also conducted SWOT analyses to determine the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats associated with these sectors to better inform the MBSO. And the main deliverable of this work was this beautiful climate tech landscape report, where we go into detail about 5 key sectors in Arizona that we identified as having the most potential opportunity for Dutch businesses. In this report, we highlight a few key innovators, so just some organizations that are doing some cool things in climate tech, some relevant research networks and organizations in these sectors, go into some potential Dutch synergies within these sectors, and recommend how we envision the MBSO using this report, with the ultimate goal of the MBSO being able to take this report to better inform Dutch businesses about the climate tech landscape in Arizona and hopefully plug them into the market so they can deliver some solutions. So going forward, we're going to first dive into the world of climate tech research in Arizona.
Okay, so as you can see on the slide, ASU and U of A both have a lot of innovative climate technology going on at the school, except their expertises differ. ASU focuses more on a systems level approach and deployable solutions by partnering up with businesses and organizations to pilot innovations that they made. ASU combines research and engineering to address environmental challenges through deployable solutions in cities' industries. And they aim to integrate sustainability into urban development through multiple efforts, such as the Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory, where they use a collaborative framework to advance research and innovation into translatable actions, such as extreme heat, water scarcity, and high energy consumption. And ASU also has strong research at the Rob Walton Sustainability Solutions Service. And here what they do is they focus on scaling developed solutions by working with partners. So this is actually putting it into place when they do that. At NAU, they also do a lot in climate tech, but it's more so research on ecosystems rather than like developing innovative climate technology. So that's why there's not many like listed there. But the other big research institutions that are actors in Arizona are the Arizona Game and Fish, the United States Geological Survey, and the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. Okay, so moving on to the next section, there's a few sectors that our group wanted to highlight that we thought offered the most opportunity for Dutch and Arizona synergies for Arizona's needs and the Dutch's expertise and where they could intersect. So the first section we're going to look a little bit deeper into is water, and we're choosing to define water as innovations that improve the efficiency, resilience, and reliability of water-related systems or improve circularity. In Arizona, this is technology that enables drought scenario planning, predictive flooding, and mitigating high energy consumption. Some of the innovators that stood out to me the most in Arizona is Source Global, which makes drinking water from the air using solar-powered hydro panels and atmospheric water capture, and Purity Resource, who has invented technology that wastewater is purified from semiconductor and manufacturing systems. So with this, less fresh water is being used. And there's a few networks that are the most popular out of the ones that I listed, and those ones are the Arizona Water Association and the Arizona Water Environment Federation. So lastly, when looking at water, when looking into the strengths and to the gaps, a strength that there is in Arizona in the climate tech research area is that there is utility support. Because of this, that makes enacting laws and regulations regarding the implementation of climate tech easier and feasible. There's also strong research institutions, as you guys saw in the previous slide, at ASU and U of A. So this allows for continuous development. And there's also available funding through the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority, which is a state agency that provides money for water startups to be able to receive technical assistance when scaling their innovations, I guess, into Arizona. And moving on to into the gaps, there's slow regulatory approval and policy uncertainty, specifically pertaining to the Colorado River allocations, which are constantly changing. And since these are constantly changing, that can offer a good opportunity for Dutch intervention for them to implement their innovations. So yeah, high adoption, cost limit scaling. There's insufficient predictive and adaptable real-time modeling tools, which are essential when planning for droughts or floods and trying to mitigate the negatives that might come from those issues. And finally, the synergy that stood out to me probably the most was that in Arizona, there's a need for automated precision irrigation to improve drought and flood resilience. And since the Dutch are skilled in AI technology, this could be an opportunity for them to step in and deploy some of their climate tech in Arizona.
So the second sector that we wanted to highlight as a good area for Dutch businesses to intervene is urban infrastructure. So we define this as the foundational systems that enable a city to function with efficiency and resilience. So a couple key innovators from organizations that are doing some cool things that we wanted to highlight in urban infrastructure. One is a company called Steel and Spark. They make modular, self-sufficient housing units out of old shipping containers. They're kind of designed for unhoused populations or any type of temporary housing. And they're completely self-reliant, so I believe they're powered by solar panels, so they don't place any strain on the grid. And the other major thing that we wanted to highlight is the opportunity for public-private partnerships. Most of the large cities in Arizona, so your Phoenix, your Tempe, your Tucson, have parts of their government that are dedicated to some form of urban infrastructure related to climate adaptation and mitigation, particularly heat resilience. So we see a big opportunity here for Dutch businesses to come and implement their innovative technologies and work with our cities to deliver some solutions. So moving into some of the strengths and gaps, Arizona, as we've kind of highlighted so far, is an absolute hotbed for research and innovation. We know how much ASU loves innovation, and as the climate continues to get warmer, that will only increase the demand for solutions, especially as we get an increasing urbanized population. And just a couple of gaps that we see so far that could be areas that could be addressed by Dutch businesses is we do have some inequitable distribution of solutions, and also a lack of climate resilient design regulations, which leads well into a Dutch synergy. So we understand that the Dutch are very good at smart urban planning with climate adaptation. They have much more stringent regulations when it comes to urban design in terms of climate resilience and adaptation. And where that's a gap here, the Dutch businesses are already used to operating under those stricter regulations, which could better equip them to deliver their solutions to the Arizona market.
Next, I would like to highlight the desert food system sector of climate tech. Across Arizona, companies are utilizing technology to grow food using less water, less space, and closer to urban populations. Across this sector, organizations are seeking to address the effects of long-term drought and inequitable access to fresh produce in urban spaces, utilizing indoor vertical farming techniques and hydroponic technologies. Two of these companies are 1.1 and True Garden, which claim to be able to grow 200 more plants per acre using 90% less space and less water than their traditional counterparts. Arizona also has networks available for farmers. Ones offered by U of A include Farm Tech Connect, which connects farmers to the latest agriculture technology, as well as a research network that connects farmers to the latest urban smart agriculture research. Across our report, we highlight the areas of strength in Arizona in this sector. Those include funding opportunities through Cultivate Phoenix, which is an agri-food tech incubator based out of the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Institute at ASU, as well as the American Rescue Plan Act food grant opportunities offered by the City of Phoenix, which target sustainable food tech companies. We also identify gaps such as the need to scale up to the size of traditional agriculture, as well as address the high energy demands and capital costs. We've identified the Dutch strength of precision agriculture and controlled environment farming as a potential area for synergy between the Netherlands and Arizona.
The next sector that we found was circularity. So we define this basically as any company that is keeping materials in circulation for as long as possible, continuing to add value to those materials. A few of the key innovators that I'd like to highlight first is the Resource Innovation Campus. Shout out to the Walton Sustainability Solutions Service. They worked with the City of Phoenix to make this circularity hub a reality. It's got 5 different parts in it. It's got a composting facility, a materials recovery facility. It even has office spaces that entrepreneurs can rent out and develop new ideas, which is really exciting and cool. A few of the other innovators that I'd like to point out are Serbo Solutions. They do lithium-ion battery recycling, which is going to be more and more important as we continue to electrify Arizona. And Cyclic Materials, which does rare earth recycling. They recycle magnets from end-of-life products. This sector has a ton of really cool innovation going on right now, but we still have a few key gaps. Some of those gaps really include advanced infrastructure and a need for industry expertise, specifically in tire and glass recycling. There's a lot of that in Arizona, but we don't have a lot of people that actually recycle it here. But this is somewhere that the Dutch can come in and really help give some expertise because the Netherlands has an amazing recycling rate, and especially their glass. And then our last and final sector is decarbonization. So we define this as anything that is helping us to achieve net zero, so batteries, carbon capture, etc. A few of the key innovators are Carbon Capture Inc. This is located in Mesa. They actually produce DAC panels that are for mass production, so with the goal of eventually being able to sell those to companies. And then Dimensional Energy. They actually produce a synthetic crude from CO2, and they have contracts to use it as sustainable aviation fuel in the future, which is super exciting and very high tech. So this sector has a ton of really cool innovation going on. For a while, there was a lot more talk about hydrogen and decarbonization here in Arizona. It has slowed down a little bit, but we still wanted to include this because Arizona is so battery and solar friendly. It's a great place for this kind of innovation. We would love to have Dutch business come here and help push along our goals with this. Some of the gaps that still exist really revolve around storage logistics here in Arizona and like a CO2 pipeline. This is some place that we see that we can share knowledge because the Netherlands has a CO2 pipeline and they actually have a storage infrastructure off of their coast.
Lastly, I'd like to walk through how we envision the office using our materials. For example, a hypothetical Dutch hydroponic company approaches the MBSO wanting to know more about the climate tech industry in Arizona. The office could then look to our landscape report, find the corresponding page, and connect that company to the relevant resources, such as funding opportunities or networking events.
So in conclusion, we think that Arizona has a strong and growing climate tech ecosystem. We believe that this is a great place for Dutch business to come. There's a lot of opportunities here and a lot of gaps that still remain that we need help with. And we know that Arizona and Dutch businesses can partner together to create long-lasting solutions that will overall improve the quality of life for everyone in this region. Thank you, and especially thank you to Marloes. You've been a wonderful person to work with. Oh, again. One more. Yeah. Connect with us.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be that guy and ask you a question. So you mentioned something about tires, and you have a couple people, myself included, from Discount Tire.
Yeah.
What is it that they, I guess, need assistance with, or what were they looking for?
Yeah, so the tire and glass recycling bit actually comes from the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. Tires and glass were highlighted in their 2025 reports as the things that Arizona needs the most help with. So the idea just being that Arizona has so much tires coming out of just all of the, I think like car manufacturing facilities that we have, all of the dealerships and stuff that, and there's nowhere for these tires to go. So it was basically asking that we need more innovation for these tire recycling. I've heard of, innovation in like burning tires as fuel for specifically cement and concrete creation as being like one of those tools that we can use to just give more value to tires, but I haven't heard of a lot of recycling options of turning those tires into something new. And I actually didn't find any when I was doing the research either. So if anyone knows of any, let me know. There's a lot of tires. But yeah, thanks for that question.
Hi, I'm Colin Tatro, longtime listener, not a first-time caller here. My question is actually more of your perspective. So you've talked about some of the Dutch synergies and opportunities here in the state. I'm curious, your two ideas to unclog, if you will. Anyone? No? Clog?
Oh, clog.
Brilliant.
The
Brilliant.
deployment of these Dutch technologies and opportunities in the States. Thank you.
Do you want it? Okay, I can go for this one. So I think we've shown that the Netherlands has a lot of technological solutions for Arizona problems. A big issue of that is funding for these projects to start up with. I think the issue is maybe de-risking the opportunity for these events or these sectors from the Netherlands coming over to here. I know it's a big ask to move in when you're not sure about funding or having enough resources to start up. So I think initially more investments and maybe more government federal support could help jumpstart some of these technological solutions taking a hold in Arizona.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the regulation is a big piece. Another thing that I think about a lot is just the sheer size of the Netherlands. When you come to Arizona, everything's a lot more spread out. It does change a lot of things, especially even just pure landscape. When we talk about decarbonization, there's a lot of geological features that inhibit some of those technologies from happening that, a different kind of landscape exists in the Netherlands, just like physical rocks and stuff that is different, that inhibits that kind of growth. But I think the size of stuff, especially when we talk about recycling or really implementing any kind of framework, there's just a big kind of difference in the people that exist in these Arizona versus Netherlands. That's a good answer. Want to add anything? Thank you for that question, Colin.
Any last questions?
Yeah, just about a day of climate tech. Arizona and the Netherlands having such different climates. How do you think the NBSO would have more of an educational framework bringing in Dutch universities like the University of Amsterdam or Erasmus University, collaborating with Arizona State, Rob Walton, U of A, to create a more educational framework for those businesses to adapt to a different climate?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can start off, and then if you guys want to add anything. So our project mainly focused on the NBSO that exists in Arizona. So most of what our report is about is really kind of trying to educate the Dutch companies that are coming here to Arizona. At the beginning, we did debate whether or not we should look a little bit more into the Dutch universities and research and see what kind of things that they might be coming from. But we really wanted to offer and show them that when they come to Arizona or when they're looking into Arizona, that we have a vast assortment of innovation and research going on here that maybe they're not expecting. I'm not sure what the world thinks of Arizona or what they imagine. I imagine maybe they're thinking of cowboys or something, or the Grand Canyon. So we just wanted to show that, there is actually so much going on here. There is climate tech here, and there is a push to grow that space. Thank you for that question. Do you want to answer or add anything? Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And up next, we have the Ranger Raccoons working with the National Wildlife Federation.
Thank you. Hello, and welcome to our project, Advancing and Coordinating State-Level Action on Reversing America's Wildlife Crisis. Our partnered organization, the National Wildlife Federation, or the NWF, is one of the oldest and most influential conservation organizations in the U.S. Established in 1936, it operates as a nonprofit, bipartisan conservation, education, and advocacy organization. Its mission is to unite Americans to ensure that both wildlife and people can thrive in a rapidly changing world. Building on this legacy, state wildlife action plans emerged in the early 2000s as part of Congress's State and Wildlife Tribal Grant Program. Each state and U.S. territory is required to submit these state wildlife action plans in order to qualify for funding from Congress. In these plans, they outline conservation strategies like habitat restoration, ecological monitoring, and long-term land and water management. Today, over 14,000 species have been identified as needing specific conservation attention. Despite their importance, however, state wildlife action plans are inhibited by several challenges. The first and most significant being a severe funding gap. An estimated minimum of $1.6 billion in annual investment is needed in order for states to fully implement and carry out these on-the-ground conservation actions. Unfortunately, only $72 million is currently being administered in this fiscal year. Secondly, another challenge is a general lack of regional coordination. Many states work in silos, usually not being very aligned with neighboring states, interstate organizations, or tribal agencies. Both of these issues collectively contribute to the uneven quality and availability of ecological data. For many categories of animals, specifically invertebrates, plants, fungi, and culturally relevant species, they are data deficient, meaning that states have to take action based on data that may be incomplete or outdated. And finally, the other most significant challenge we identified is that there is a general lack of standardization among state wildlife action plans. Although many states collectively organize their actions in similar categories, the format and structure of their plans vary drastically, meaning that it's difficult to establish clear metrics and share best practices. Throughout the course of the semester, our group identified two main goals for our project. The first being to identify specific areas in which the National Wildlife Federation can best leverage its resources to better support states and territories' conservation efforts. The second, more broader objective is to promote the passing of the Recovering America's Wildlife Act in Congress. So the Recovering America's Wildlife Act represents one of the most transformative and promising opportunities in conservation and biodiversity management. It is a bipartisan proposal that would establish a dedicated long-term stream of funding for wildlife conservation, the first of its kind. It would allocate $1.4 billion annually to states, and most notably, it would dedicate $97.5 million a year to tribal nations, compared to the $6.6 million they are currently receiving in this year. It would allow states, territories, and tribes to better coordinate and carry out their conservation actions outside of short grant cycles.
What our group did is we conducted a landscape analysis where we were able to compare the different state wildlife action plans to each other. Through this analysis, we were able to identify a number of different trends and outliers, which is where we got our recommendations from for the NWF. One of the first trends that we noticed as a group was with the reporting frameworks used. These could be classified into 3 different sections: those that used a pre-established framework, others who used one adapted to their specific state's goals, and others who had an unknown framework. The most common one that we noticed was one called the CMP framework, or the Conservation Measures Partnership Framework. This allowed states to organize all of their conservation actions into 7 to 10 different areas, depending on the version that they used. Only about 22% of states did not use this framework, where about 78% used either this one or an adapted version of it. We did notice as well that any states that chose to use a framework often had clear and specific conservation actions, which makes classification of future success a lot easier.
The figure above that you see shows all of those conservation actions for the entire country sorted into those 10 categories provided by the CMP 2.0 framework. As you can see, the largest conservation action was land and water management at 26%, and the second largest was at about 16% conservation designation and planning. Land and water management had about almost 7,000 individual actions, and these refer to actions that specifically relate to how land managers steward their land. So site and area stewardship, controlled burns, the removal of invasive species. Conservation designation and planning had about 4,000 individual actions, and this one are actions like establishing parks, purchasing land, or the installment of wildlife corridors, things that directly relate to sites or species.
Next up, we also took a look at the type of stakeholder engagement. We ended up identifying 4 different types, first of which was state agencies working together. We also identified a number of different state partnerships between 2 different states, regional collaborations, which involved multiple different states, and indigenous group involvement. One of our first examples of this would be a partnership that took place between Arizona and Nevada. The main goal of this was to share their resources and also make sure that their conservation actions were aligned across their shared species and habitats. By doing so, they were able to make sure that their conservation actions were not stopping at their state boundaries. Another example of a collaboration that took place was between the Northeast states. There ended up being about 13 states that were involved in this, such as Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Connecticut. Through this partnership, they decided that they would use the same framework and that they would also make sure that their conservation actions were aligning across regions instead of just within their states. By doing so, they were able to successfully implement multiple conservation projects across the region and also make sure that their own individual goals were still being met.
During our statistical analysis, we noticed a number of regional outliers. The first of which that we wanted to identify was the Pacific region, which ran at about 2.5 times the number of research and monitoring actions than the rest of the nation. Primarily, these were coming from Washington, but this indicates that this region focused more on evidence-based scientific actions rather than traditional conservation measurement practices like our land and water management actions. The Pacific Southwest, so California and Nevada, those states ran at about 2.8 times the national average in terms of species management actions, suggesting a more species-centric approach rather than a human-centric approach, which is more apparent on the East Coast. The last one was the Midwest, which actually had 25% less land and water management actions. This region shocked us in the fact that they went below the national average and instead focused more on institutional development, so partnership building, and research and monitoring.
All right, so we really want to focus our recommendations on areas where NWF would be best able to effectively use their resources to help assist states with developing their conservation strategies and implementing conservation actions. So the three areas that we settled on were to assist states in developing regional partnerships, developing decision support tools to help support states in their complex decision making, and expanding the research base of species of greatest information needed to help fill research gaps that currently exist in this landscape. So for the first recommendation of developing regional partnerships, we already discussed some success stories with that Arizona-Nevada state partnership and the development of the Northeast Lexicon Framework as examples of how states can come together and collaborate and share resources and share data to help support each other in their conservation strategies. But there are other examples where NWF can help to intervene and to assist states where frameworks may not exist and the opportunities for collaboration may not be as present. One example of this would be the Sagebrush Conservation Initiative, which is mentioned in Utah's SWAP as a collaborative effort between 13 Western US states to help protect the sagebrush ecosystem. This initiative arose without the collaborative framework present, such as we see in the Northeast region. So there's currently no Western framework that's present, but they were able to get 13 states on board to help with this conservation initiative. This would be a great way for NWF to help set up summits between SWAP leaders from different states to help push forward those joint goals that states may share from those patterns that we noticed during our landscape analysis. And then within those summits, they can also invite tribal groups using their network to help set up those connections between tribal agencies and state agencies, granted that they're getting a greater provision of funding under RAWA, and they have historically been left out of this SWAP planning process. Then for our second recommendation, we wanted to recommend that NWF help develop decision support tools to assist states in making complex decisions using limited budgets, as we saw earlier. So the main example of this that helped guide our decision making here was the California Areas of Conservation Emphasis, or ACE decision support tool. This decision support tool was used extensively in California SWAP leaders' decision making in developing their conservation strategy. And this decision support tool helps to model California's landscape utilizing biodiversity data sets on a geospatial map that shows information about different factors such as species rarity, species richness, ecological stressors, and climate resilience information, among many other factors. This was a great best use case example of how to implement conservation data and data sharing at every stakeholder engagement level. This was a big part of the puzzle for NWF. They really wanted to move forward in a way that they could help assist states engage stakeholders at every level. And California was able to effectively do so in utilizing this tool through the data collection process, where they were able to pull data from different stakeholders, such as local universities, regional research centers, state research centers, governmental agencies, tribal agencies, and non-governmental organizations. So this would be a big area for the future if they were able to move forward with this. Then for our final recommendation, expanding the research base of species of greatest information needed. This group involves plants, invertebrates, fungi, and tribally significant species. This was the biggest research gap that we found while analyzing these swaps, and many states cited a lack of research and regulatory authority as the primary reasons why they were inhibited from developing really effective strategies for conserving these species in the current revision of swaps. This is something to look forward to in the future, as this is going to be developing more with states starting to include this in their swaps. And NWF has already started surveying certain states about what they are doing currently to develop conservation strategies for these species. This is also an important area, as many states cited that they struggled to integrate their communication between species-specific staff and habitat-specific staff. And this was very evident while looking at the swaps, as these two sections of conservation strategies were often physically separated within the actual document of the swap. And this is something that we believe could be developed more holistically by bringing these teams together and helping to make sure that while they are looking at this new development with conservation strategies for these SGINs, that they really integrate those two teams together and form more holistic strategies moving forward. All right, we wanted to thank the NWF, Jill, John, and Diane, our project partners, for really supporting us through this project, and our classmates, and Dr. Kelman, of course. All right, you guys have any questions? Don't be shy. All right, Diane.
Wow, that was outstanding. Thank you so much. Those are really, really helpful recommendations. So I'm Diane Pataki from the National Wildlife Federation. And since you started this project, we've received the president's budget for our fiscal year 27, and it brings the state and tribal wildlife grant program to 0. So last week, we were on the Hill lobbying to keep funding this program. What would you recommend for us in terms of our messaging to members of Congress? Why should they keep funding this program? What arguments could we make to save even the meager $72 million that's going to this program every year?
One of my biggest recommendations would be trying to appeal to their interests. Big thing about in protecting wildlife and everything is that we also gain our resources from it. So there's no way that we can continue to exist as a society if we aren't protecting our resources as well. So even if they do not want to protect it in the name of conservation, there's still a lot of different reasons that we should be protecting the wildlife and making sure that our habitats and species are still able to continue to survive. So my biggest recommendation would probably be focusing on that aspect as well.
I would definitely agree with that. Playing to their interests are definitely one of our best strategies and opportunities. I think one of the ways that we could frame it is that taking that money out of that budget is also putting a strain on the state because that money is now going to have to be supplemented somewhere. And so typically that means that it's just pushing the cost on to the next agency in line.
I was also just going to add on and say that I think we should also recommend more public engagement as well. I think that state wildlife action plans are largely internal documents, and there's not as much public engagement as there could be. And with more public engagement and support comes more political support as well.
Yeah, I mean, kind of going off of that as well, I think that public engagement is a big part. We talked a lot about stakeholder engagement with you guys while we were developing our project and just while we were looking at our swaps while we were doing the landscape analysis. And that was a really big piece of the puzzle that was kind of missing. And just getting people to care about it more will go a long way in terms of showing government leaders that, hey, the public does care about this. This is something that we want to keep pushing and keep funding. So just being able to engage the public as well and making sure that they're knowledgeable about what's happening, that's a really big piece of the puzzle. Any other questions?
Hello, this is my second question, but I'm Sean Martinez again. I had a question about the tribal government inputs. The wide variety of size of the different tribal governments obviously would impact the ability and participation rate, with some of the tribal governments, like some of the tribal nations only having a few hundred, sometimes less people. So for the smaller entities, are they participating or falling under the state's input or action plans? And like, how is the NWF kind of, are they reaching out to ensure that like traditional ecological knowledge is being incorporated and to ensure like culturally sensitive species are being taken care of?
I could take a jab at that. So the biggest issue currently isn't necessarily that those tribal agencies aren't ready to work on those things. It's mostly that there's an error in communication there a little bit. A lot of these government agencies, the swap leaders, will reach out to tribal agencies, but the way that they're going about it, they try to kind of, I guess, limit their ability to participate, or it's just not effective at getting those tribal leaders to come in and participate. So I would say the biggest focus would be in setting up those summits, getting everybody involved in a way where everyone knows what's happening, because sometimes those tribal leaders won't even know that they were invited to come and participate and share their thoughts on those issues. So that's a really big piece of it. And then also just looking at what NWF can do. They have a really extensive network that reaches across a lot of these tribal agencies, and they really know a lot of people in different places that they can put into contact with each other. So it's mostly just about setting up those communication channels for the future so that those groups are working together a bit better. I don't know if you guys had anything to add or. All right, any other questions?
Okay, my question had to do with the question from before a little bit. When you guys were looking at these plans, was there anything about like environmental services in there? Like maybe part of the funding thing can be like, oh, like this park actually like, for example, I was thinking like mangroves, they provide like flood protection, and that's something you can put like a monetary value to. So like, is there any of that in these plans? Could we use that as like a funding, as like showing that these parks actually have monetary value to them?
Actually, one state did stand out with this. I believe it was, if I'm correct and not mistaken, it was Missouri. They specifically mentioned the ecosystem services in their report and how it affects their population. So they used it as an argument or a tool to kind of validate why they needed to invest in these things or why these species were species of greatest need for their state.
Yeah, I will say as well, it depended on the state whether they mentioned that, because states do have the freedom to include what information they feel is most important to their state. So as long as they're aligning to the 8 sections that need to be in there. So I think that would be a great area of support for the NWF to be able to provide, to maybe influence some states to maybe incorporate that into their next plan.
Also, just briefly want to mention, there were a few states that weren't necessarily as concerned about the conservation aspect of everything. More so, a lot of states, or not a lot, but a couple of states would be more concerned about those commercial aspects of conservation. So a lot of states were interested in hunting and recreation as well, and that was a big part of certain states' conservation strategies. So it's definitely something important to consider, is that economic aspect as well. And we also discussed potentially modeling budget scenarios for states, but we ultimately didn't include that in as extensive detail in our report as we originally planned for. But that's something to consider for the future, as well as how those things factor into a state's budget.
Thank you.
All right, up next we have the Casa Grande Water Alliance working with the City of Casa Grande. Are they good on time? Oh, I know, but I mean for their timing. Right.
Greetings, everybody. Hello, fellow students, faculty, distinguished guests. My name is Sawyer. I'm joined by Jenny, Annika, and Tracy. We are the Casa Grande Water Alliance. First of all, I'd like to say this is a student-created project, so thank you to Jenny. Casa Grande is a small city located in the I-10 corridor in central Arizona. This location means that they are subject to an uncertain water future, as we expect the Colorado River allotment to diminish over time. They're trying to foster an increasingly business-friendly environment without compromising their water conservation goals. The role of the project team is to assist them in bridging the gap between their stated water conservation goals and their 2030 general plan, and where they exist currently in codified policy elements, public engagement, and other water conservation measures.
In order to address this problem, our team used a variety of different methods to develop 3 key recommendations: code recommendations, a decision support tool, and community engagement tools. We're going to walk you through that for the rest of our presentation and then conclude with some next steps. So beginning with the methods, we primarily did a lot of different analyses, starting with a gap analysis. For this gap analysis, we compared Casa Grande's goals and their 2030 general plan to the city codes that they have. Their primary goal is to improve and maintain the character of the community and quality of life for their residents, one of which we think is important to do through water conservation. Looking more specifically at water conservation related goals, you can see here that Casa Grande has a handful of codes to meet those goals, either fully, partially, or not at all. So a lot of what we wanted to look at is where supplemental water conservation codes could help support goals in the general plan, specifically related to native landscaping standards, low water use plant design, park design, and irrigation.
And so as we got ready to do our landscape analysis, the first thing we had to do was identify what cities we were going to review. What we really wanted to do was have a broad spectrum of categories, criteria, implementation practices that we can take from. For example, Buckeye and Maricopa, they have similar economic landscape, a similar population. Somewhere in the middle, we have Tucson, who's great in community engagement. And then we also have on the other spectrum, the city of Peoria, which is almost twice the size of Casa Grande, which they expect to be at in about 15 to 20 years. And they are also a leading sustainable city. And so as we see all these criteria, what we really wanted to capture was an opportunity to see water resource from various lenses for Casa Grande. So as we did that landscape analysis, we had 2 major categories that we were looking at: city codes and city programs. What you see here is just a small fraction of what we identified, but landscapes, plumbing, and utility codes captured about 40 to 50% of the codes that we saw throughout all the cities. Rebates is on here because we saw that some of the cities with the most substantial sustainable practices actually codified their rebates, which we thought was really interesting. And then in terms of programs, we identified many community engagement programs and city strategies.
And the final piece of analysis that we looked at here was an economic impact analysis. And at the heart of this, we're really trying to understand how different growth and development patterns in Casa Grande are going to affect long-term water demand. And in conversation with the city, we realized that economic growth and housing growth are 2 key areas we really wanted to focus on. So for our first scenario within economic growth, we were taking some job estimates from industries that are either in planning or in progress in Casa Grande to see how that will impact water use into the future. And for our housing growth scenario, we wanted to separate out between housing types, so between single-family units and multifamily units. With projected growth in the housing stock in Casa Grande, how is that going to affect water usage? So in order to know where we're headed with water, we have to know where we're at right now. So if you're looking at this, I just want to say this is where we're at pre-impact. So thinking of the economy today, you can see the largest water user is going to be that aggregate bucket of farming, agriculture, and ranching. It's very indicative of economic activity in Casa Grande at the moment, but you can also see industrial use here. So I'm going to pull your attention up a bit to Lucid Motors and Abbott Nutrition. Casa Grande is really focusing on welcoming, as Sawyer said, some of these larger businesses and manufacturers to their local economy. So that's what we're trying to get at the heart at with the impact. So for our economic growth scenario, a bit here, so I'll walk you through it. The biggest thing I want to point out is that you can see about 3 lines up that copper mining switches from a pretty insignificant water user to a large water user in the context of our project. But you can also see that with economic activity, there are going to be indirect and induced effects of these industries coming to Casa Grande. And what I mean by that is you see industries that we did not directly impact within the model we used to create this. So I'm going to pull your attention up to maintenance, repair of non-residential structures, as well as metal mining services, private household employment use. These industries are now also going to ask for water in ways that we did not directly look for within the model. And finally, for our housing growth scenario, the main takeaway here is that single-family units are going to, on average, use more water than multifamily units. So over the next 15 years, as housing stock in Casa Grande increases,
there's some important considerations about how this water is used within the residential sector. So for single-family homes specifically, we're pointing out the fact that, okay, yes, fixtures inside the homes are an important place for code to step in and try to support some water conservation efforts, but a lot of that water is actually used outside for outdoor landscaping. So we'll get a little bit into that when we walk you through our code recommendations. And so we'll move on to that now with our recommendations here. And as Sawyer mentioned, we really are looking at what are some of those codified policies that the city can implement, but we also wanted to develop some complementary materials to assist them with that implementation. And those come in the form of the Water Adjusted Value Index, or the WAVI, as well as some community engagement tools that we've developed.
Our first and primary recommendation is for the City of Casa Grande to adopt the codes that we are recommending. In this 20-page document, we outline 9 different specific codes for Casa Grande that, given all the information we just went through, we think will be most beneficial for them to adopt to conserve water going into the future. Beginning with the Pinal County AMA Low Water Use Plant List, we're suggesting that they require plants from this list be used in all of their incoming landscaping, as they are designated by the county as low water use plant lists. Therefore, they'll help conserve water in landscaping. We're also recommending that the city updates their plumbing code to the latest version of the International Plumbing Code, as that has more water efficiencies than previous versions. It would be really beneficial for the city to define water waste, and with that, the code prohibits specific uses of water that are considered water waste. So one of this requirements would be for new commercial car washes to recycle their water. It also requires automatic hose shutoffs for hose nozzles. By incorporating more efficient irrigation design into landscaping, the city can also conserve water. So efficient irrigation design would be drip irrigation rather than like spray or flood irrigation. In this code, we're also recommending that Casa Grande adopt a time of use restriction, so that way more watering is going on at night and water isn't lost due to evaporation and high temps or from wind. We're also recommending a turf restriction for the city. So this would prohibit the installation of non-functional turf. Non-functional turf is a grass area that's not used for human recreation, human use, or animal use. And so it's often just the little bits of grass that you see in front of businesses. So by not letting people install that as they're growing and developing, the city will help conserve a lot of water by instead using plants that are in the Pinal County AMA Low Water Use Plant List. Lastly, a couple more recommendations in code is a large water user ordinance. So this ordinance would require that for those businesses and industries that use a lot of water and high volumes of water, it caps the amount of water that they can use per day. And the city can set a limit on this in order to make sure they're using their water in the most efficient way that the city chooses. Lastly, the drought contingency plan and rebates are a little bit different. The drought contingency plan, by putting in this in their code, Casa Grande would acknowledge that water is a valuable and scarce resource, and that if or when it slowly becomes more scarce, the city has a plan to deal with it and knows how to conserve water in increasing steps along the way. We're recommending that the city of Casa Grande introduce rebates into their program, and so by developing rebates and then putting them in their code to make them official, the city will be able to conserve a lot of water. For example, one of these would be a turf removal rebate. So if you are a homeowner and you want to switch the grass in your front yard into those low water use plants, you can gain a benefit from the city to support you in doing that. This is an overview of the codes that we're recommending. Next, Sawyer will talk about the Water Adjusted Value Index.
The project team recognized the unique opportunity to provide a decision support tool. So we introduced the Water Adjusted Value Index. This is a spreadsheet for rule of thumb analysis by economic development and planning personnel. You would input various known values, such as tax revenue provided by a new piece of business, jobs created, how much those jobs pay. The output of this spreadsheet is a ratioed value of economic value to the local economy per water consumed. The WAVI, as we call it, is designed with modularity in mind. As you can see on the right side of the screen in column N, you can actually adjust the weights of these various input columns to reflect future scenarios, future priorities. For instance, prioritizing the income from city tax paid by a hypothetical piece of business versus local procurement in the local economy.
And finally, we get into our last deliverable, and that is the community engagement tools. Now, what we really wanted to capture with the community engagement is the collaborative efforts that need to go when you're trying to do water conservation and sustainability. So what the team did is we did essentially a campaign, if you will. We called it What You Can Do and What the City is Doing. What you can do informs the residents about some small things that may be able to do in their daily lives. This can be things like indoor efficiency, like running a full load, outdoor, like calling back to the AMA plant list or doing irrigation at night. We also added local resources. So Arizona Water Company, which is their local water utility company, they actually have a free conservation kit that residents can apply to get. And then the city also has a See Fix It app, which residents can call if they see any issues. On the other side of that, we have what city is doing. Now, assuming they adopted a few of the codes that we've created, this would give residents information on some codes that may affect them directly. For example, some water waste codes, some turf restriction codes, and outdoor misting restrictions. For example, no misting when there are no residents outside. Ultimately, what we want to capture here is that in order to fulfill water conservation, it needs to be collaborative, and we're all trying to do our part. Another thing we decided to create was a mock-up website. Now, if you go on the casagrande.org website, this page might actually look familiar. What we identified with some of the cities that had the best water conservation practices was that they had a landing page for their residents where residents can go and look at what the city is actively doing. So we added a few things that already exist, like the Save It program, which is in collaboration with Arizona Water, and the Report a Problem link, which is the See Fix It. We also added a few things that we created as a team or we thought may be a good idea. For example, if they adopted a few of our codes, they can have their codes, they can have rebates, similar to the Wavy, which is on the residential or on the city side, if residents want to use a water use calculator to look at what their water use is. Ultimately, this gives residents a place where they can see what options the city is offering.
So we walked you through quite a bit of information, and really how we see this project moving forward falls into two buckets. So the implementation side and then the continuing information side. So as far as implementation, we really think that it would be beneficial for the city to conduct a community survey. And to do this, we want to make sure that residents' sentiments on water conservation are heard, but also that the city has an opportunity to increase public buy-in as these codes are getting implemented. And as Annika mentioned, within the codes, some of them come with a program. So we think that before these codes kind of make their way into practice, that the city kind of takes the initial step right now to start developing out some of those programs. And for both of these elements, we think that it would be really great for the city to have either a dedicated water conservation specialist or a department that's going to champion water conservation and water stewardship for the city of Casa Grande. And as far as further considerations and also just continuing information, as we know, in Arizona, we have an evolving supply of water. We've mentioned it quite a few times in our project, and you've heard it in others, that the Colorado River allocations are changing, but we're also starting to see where new supplies of water are going to start to make up for some of those gaps. And both of those are now changing our water policy landscape. At the city level, county level, state level, we're going to start to see some changes come down the line. And so as far as the city is concerned, keeping an eye on this space is really important. And the last piece is that we understand water to be a common denominator for a lot of other systems. Specifically, the water, energy, food nexus is important for the city to consider for quality of life, because as long as you have water security, you then have security for your energy systems and your food systems. And we think that it would just be good for the city to kind of keep an eye on these things as they're moving forward. And with that, we would like to thank the City of Casa Grande and the School of Sustainability for giving us the opportunity to do this project, and we'll turn it over to you all for any questions you might have.
Rob, you have to wait. All right. Okay, first, fantastic presentation. You should all be really proud of the work you've done. Question to you about your codes. So really thoughtful work around the different, water efficient plants, et cetera. But obviously, as you put in more sort of xeric landscaping, you take out non-functional turf, you may have a feedback that you get more heat, right? Because you've taken out all this sort of evapotranspiration in the system. So I'm just curious if you've thought a little bit about how you know, in the codes, or if any thought went into thinking about, you know, that dimension, because as you get more heat, then you may in fact end up using more water. So just your thoughts about that.
So here in the Southwest, heat and water are always kind of going to be butting heads a little bit in priority, especially here in Phoenix and outlying areas. I believe that early discussions for this project actually did involve possibly observing heat instead of water. For the scope of our project, we were prioritizing just water, but going forward, we may want to give some attention to incorporating heat mitigation elements into this while being water conscious.
First of all, you did a wonderful job on presenting this and thorough research, very thoughtful, very comprehensive. I do have a question though about the code part of it. The code recommendations are very regulatory heavy, okay, and economic developers, chambers of commerce, Colin, hates regulation, right? And so what is your argument for the pushback that you would get from the economic development community? What do you say is the return on investment if these codes are adopted?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would begin by saying some of how we've justified the necessity for these codes is looking in that peer landscape that Jenny was talking about. And so I would say, saw Buckeye as a very similar economic baseline to Casa Grande, and that they have very similar growth goals and growth projections. But where Casa Grande doesn't have a lot of these codes, Buckeye does. And Buckeye has out of the cities that we observed, one of the strongest codes for water conservation. And so I think that goes to show that you don't have to sacrifice economic development in order to have water conservation, but that you can still have some of those stronger regulations while providing for economic growth. Another argument that I think is really valid for Casa Grande is that there is potentially a limited water supply, and so putting thought into how you want to be using that water and how it can be beneficial to your whole community in order to support residents' quality of life and maintaining that character, you're going to have to be more thoughtful in where, when, and how you're using that water. So it's not to say that certain businesses don't get water or we're prohibiting businesses or creating barriers for businesses, but that we're just being really intentional that each business who is using water and receiving water is using it in the most efficient way they can.
I think also there's something to be said for orienting the messaging around local resilience, self-reliance, you know, kind of trying to appeal to a more conservative mindset, not maybe, you know, not throwing the word sustainability all over it, but in reality, that's what it really is in essence.
Thank you so much for that. And to also tie you in with one of the previous groups, if they're looking for solutions in water treatment or in water efficiency, give either them or myself a call because I think there's some Dutch solutions waiting for you.
Great, thank you. We might have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Jenny Speck. I work for City of Phoenix Water. I'm a conservation specialist. Great presentation also. I agree with this gentleman back here. So I just had a question. I thought your recommendations were great. The one question I had was about the misters. We've gotten some questions from residents regarding misters, but what we found is that they don't actually use a substantial amount of water compared to other recommendations. So I was just wondering why that was one of your suggestions. Was it something that people had brought up in your research, or yeah, just what was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So there's multiple answers to that. So when in our initial conversation with the city, they already had a few ideas of things that may want to see. I think misters was one of those that kind of came up. And so when we were developing the codes, what we wanted to capture was some items that were maybe easier to implement, maybe easier for them to be able to do, and some things that were a lot more challenging. So for example, the large water user, that might be a lot more conversation, that might have a lot more stakeholders. And so it is something that maybe doesn't use as much water, but I think one of the things is if it's doing something, right? Is there enough that we can conserve wherever we can?
Right, great job. And up next, we have the Anderson Project working with Anderson Windows and Doors. And this is our final presentation.
Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to the Strategic Evaluation of Sustainability Certifications for Anderson Windows and Doors. I'm Jasmine, this is Alejandra, Tanish, and Emily, and we're really excited to present our Capstone project to you today.
So to provide you with some insight on who Anderson is a window and door manufacturing company. They were founded in 1903 and they're based out of Bayport, Minnesota. They are one of the most recognized and largest brands in the industry, with that industry being valued at 7.3 billion USD. A fun fact about Anderson is that Home Depot is the only major retailer allowed to distribute and hold Anderson products.
So we collaborated with Anderson to assess their current certification portfolio and their current sustainability strategy. Our goal was to identify opportunities to improve their transparency, accountability, and their long-term commitment to sustainability. So in order to address these gaps, we assessed and identified the current portfolio against their competitors. We analyzed their industry landscape, best practices, and their methods. We also performed a SWOT analysis. And finally, we conducted a survey to gain insights into the customer segments and different certification values accordingly.
So sustainability certifications have various benefits. First, they help meet regulatory requirements. This is important to ensure that products meet sustainability standards, helping qualify for LEED points, architects and developers working on green buildings. They also help with energy savings and meeting government incentives for projects where sustainability is a focus. And lastly, meeting customer priorities, as consumers are more likely to purchase products that have verified sustainability attributes. So now I'm going to highlight some key sustainability certifications that our presentation will focus on, along with their consumer benefits. So the first is the Forest Stewardship Council. This verifies that wood comes from responsibly managed forests globally, and the benefit is a recognition for sustainably sourced materials. The second is the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. This is the North American certification for responsibly managed forests, and the benefit, similar to the one above, is a recognition that materials are sustainably sourced in North America. The third is Energy Star. This identifies the energy efficiency in products, and the benefit is a 20 to 35% lower energy consumption and reduced utility bill. And the last is environmental product declarations. These report the life cycle impacts of products using life cycle assessment, and the benefit is a documentation of the carbon impact of materials, which is important in construction projects. So as part of our project, we benchmarked Anderson against its key competitors in the US, Pella and Marvin. So Anderson leads the group with an estimated $4 billion in revenue, Pella at 2.4, and Marvin at 1.8. So from our table, you can see that all three companies have the FSC and Energy Star certifications, and we see the differentiation start to happen where Pella and Marvin both have the SFI certification, whereas Anderson does not. On the other hand, Anderson has the EPD certification on select product lines, whereas its competitors don't. So while Pella and Marvin highlight sustainable forestry certifications, Anderson has a unique advantage in having EPDs as they highlight product transparency
After conducting our landscape analysis, the team identified 3 best practices that best represent the evolution of sustainable in the landscape. With the first one being segment-specific sustainability signaling, essentially meaning different stakeholders value different sustainability signals. The audiences being like architects, developers, contractors, and an end consumer like a homeowner. Due to them valuing different signals, attributes, and certifications, it is important to always be tailoring to these different people to ensure that they get the best value out of their product. The second one being periodic reassessment of certification value. With the landscape ever-changing and evolving, it is essential to continuously evaluate certifications for their strategic relevance. This is especially important to evolving trends in the landscape and to do future-oriented thinking and making sure that none of the certifications are becoming redundant. The third being integration into core product strategy. Currently, Anderson is a leader in this due to their creation of Fibrix, a composite material that outperforms and outlasts other industry materials like wood, vinyl, and aluminum. Due to this, it keeps the material out of landfills longer and it just outlasts the other materials. By being a sustainable material, it also qualifies Anderson for Energy Star and LEED as some certifications.
So we also conducted a SWOT analysis of Anderson's certification strategy. Some of the strengths are that they have long-standing certifications and that their certification strategy is very strong in spec-driven markets. And as mentioned before, they use EPDs to support product transparency. Some weaknesses are that there is a lack of a formalized certification strategy and that certification maintenance takes a lot of time. As well, there's a lot of inconsistent coverage of these certifications against products and customer segments. Some threats are that certifications are becoming industry standard and that there are constant changing regulations associated with them. And this leads to a lot of customer confusion. Some opportunities for Anderson are that there is a growing demand for material transparency and that they can also scale these certifications across more product lines, as well as improving communication of these certifications, which mitigates some of the threats that I had previously mentioned.
Further, based on our findings from analysis and discussions with Anderson, we identified a gap in the kind of data they have. So we conducted a customer survey where we wanted to understand customer behavior towards sustainable buying habits. We formed a 19-questionnaire survey where we asked questions with multiple selections. And with the help of Anderson, we distributed this survey in their network and we received 328 responses. Again, you can see the breakdown of the response on the screen over here. We can see that highest amount of responses we received was from dealers, being 163. And there's an example of one of the questions we asked in the survey and the kind of responses we anticipated. Just some key takeaways from the survey. First, that Energy Star is universally recognized, which means it's no longer a differentiator. It's simply expected. Second, when clients do value sustainability, they care most about cost savings and about meeting regulations. So this tells us that the value is very practical and not just environment itself. Third, one of the biggest barriers towards sustainability is in skepticism. It's lack of demand and budget constraints. So this tells us the issue is not value, but rather prioritization. We also found that complexity plays a big role. Inefficient communication and too many messaging leads to confusion and reduces the effectiveness of these certifications. And finally, customers rely most on manufacturing websites and product spec sheets for sustainability information. So this presents Anderson a direct opportunity to kind of control how they control this information on their websites. And this is just an example of one of the questions we asked in our survey and the way we analyzed this. In this particular question, we wanted to understand how aware are the individuals about sustainability certifications, and each response required a Likert scale response from being not aware to all the way to aware. And we can clearly see the highest amount of responses received is for the Energy Star certification.
So as a culmination of our research, we identified 4 strategic recommendations in order to address these gaps. First recommendation being to product-specific marketing, expanding the sustainability certifications, their strategic sustainability messaging across marketing outlets, and then strengthening their environmental, social, and governance reporting with more measurable targets for sustainability performance tracking.
So starting with our first strategic recommendation, which is product-specific marketing. Due to the sheer amount of certifications in this industry and the saturation of them, it is difficult for audiences to understand what tangible benefit they are getting by choosing the product. This is especially important when they're shopping around with a competitor or for Anderson and not understanding what really differentiates them or what at the end of the day gives them that benefit. So this is where we come in with the recommendation of developing a simplified product level sustainability profile that clearly does communicate those attributes. On the label right there is the a mock label for their E-Series products that highlights 4 different certifications within it. And using Energy Star and LEED as examples, with Energy Star providing the 20 to 30% lower energy consumption, which directly impacts your utility bill, an end consumer like a homeowner would tend to be swayed by that. And just by seeing it directly on the label, they would prefer that in when shopping for their product. And then the LEED certification being a certification that architects and developers highly value and prioritize, it would be essential for those that do not know that that is what is provided to have that tangible benefit. And then the small benefit that we included to represent the respective certifications are there just to educate the differing target audiences.
So our second strategic recommendation is expanding certifications. So something Anderson came to us asking was to understand whether or not they should pursue the FSI certification, which, as mentioned earlier, is the only certification that they do not have that their competitors do. So we made sure to incorporate this in our survey, and our results show that there's a strong interest for the FSC, SFI, EPD, and embodied carbon information across all groups. So while there is a significant interest for the SFI and FSC certifications, they likely provide very limited value to Anderson because they already report that their materials are responsibly sourced. So our recommendation instead is for Anderson to expand its EPD certifications across more product lines, as they already differentiate themselves in showcasing product transparency. And this also includes the embodied carbon data, which was the second highest ranked characteristic that our survey results showed. So this would provide a greater strategic value for Anderson and a greater competitive differentiation for them.
Our third recommendation, based on the findings, we kind of found that one of the biggest issues towards sustainability is not it's not a lack of effort, but rather how it's communicated. So first, there are too many certifications present without clear structure. So we recommend grouping them to clear categories like energy efficiency, health, material, environmental, so it makes it easier for the audience to understand. Second, messaging should focus less on technical details, but rather more on real-world benefits like cost savings and performance, because that way it reduces the confusion and increases the effectiveness of these certifications. And finally, Anderson's website provides a major opportunity. Currently, users have to actively search about sustainability information in their website. This is something the project team also faced when we were conducting our own research. It was very difficult to find product-level sustainability information on the website. So we recommend making it easier to navigate and having information which is kind of easier for the audience to understand, and also including some data and numbers on the screen. Like, for example, having or saying as simple as buying Energy Star certified products would lead to, let's say, 30% of energy savings would in turn lead to X amount of money saved. I think this tells a bigger picture and kind of tells a bigger picture.
So our final recommendation is to strengthen their ESG reporting. So they currently use GRI-aligned disclosures to report their ESG performance. However, competitors like JELD-WIN pair these metrics with more defined, measurable sustainability targets in order to provide greater transparency and accountability. So off on the side there, this is an example of what JELD-WIN has on their website, which is clearly more benchmarked and has time limits and goals and specific percentages of increased waste reduction. So our recommendation is that by reporting with specific, measurable, and time-bound targets, Anderson can then use these metrics in order to demonstrate more commitment to long-term progress. And yeah.
And yeah, with that, we'd like to thank Anderson and Paula for the support throughout this project. And thank you so much. Any questions?
Question. No questions about sustainability certifications?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Manavi. Really good presentation, very interesting. I was just wondering, so you had a consumer survey or survey to clients. I was wondering if that was specifically to like final consumers or if it's also to like businesses who are procuring that information or procuring their products, and if that kind of changes the sustainability like marketing strategies.
Definitely, that's a great question. And we definitely know that the survey we conducted was through Anderson's network. So it is their clients, their customers. It definitely comes with a bit of bias because at the end of the day, Anderson is putting the survey link in their newsletter towards their customers. But yeah, that was pretty much about it. We kind of included that bias in our report as well. That because we tried to do this survey or send out the links with our individual connections, but it was the best, or the most of our response we received was from Anderson's network, so that's worked out best for us.
Maybe go to the slide where you have the 5 different groups. Do you have the 5 different groups? Because there were, you had developers.
Oh, my bad.
You had dealers. You had
Yeah, so
builders.
architects, builders, contractors, dealers, and developers. So they're not the end consumer, but more or less like the middle customers. Any other questions?
Okay. What surprised you about this study is question 1. And as students with your degrees now, do you think things like LEED certification are something you would like to pursue now that you've done this project?
I can start us off. So I feel like I think, yeah, for all of us, architects are definitely the ones with most knowledge, and it seemed like almost every question they received, they knew and preferred and prioritized a lot of sustainability attributes and certifications alike, because we had both questions. So that was very shocking that since they obviously are at the forefront of planning, they tended to just be the most knowledge people, and with developers coming, dealers, right? Coming in a close second. And then, and what was the follow-up to the question? I think I would. It comes with a lot of especially when we did our consumer benefits table and seeing those tangible benefits that you're getting and receiving, because when you have those certifications, it's energy efficient, and then you can directly see that on your utility bill at the end of the day, which I didn't know that you could get. So that was very interesting to see how much money you could save.
And just adding on, I would say something that really surprised me, but also shouldn't have surprised me, is how difficult it was to kind of identify which certifications the industry has. It was not only Anderson, but across all of its competitors. You had to really dive into all of their product spec sheets in order to get that information. So I think that, with clear, transparent information and marketing, they have the possibility to be very clear in the benefits that consumers can get from them. And so, yeah, ideally, the main message, I guess, from our group is to standardize messaging.
Hey, there we go. I just wanted to let you know Paula Zaretsky is in the Zoom room, and she just wants to say a big thank you to all of you for your hard work.
Thank you, Paula.
Great work.
Let's have one more round of applause for all the students. These great presentations. I am very pleased to invite you all, just a short walk down the street, as you can see here, to Eureka and Novus Place, where we'll have appetizers firing up soon.
Congratulations, class of 2026.